I want to start today's show, and part of me wants to laugh because it is funny to an extent, but it's scary. Kamala Harris, wait to hear this one, what her campaign is now saying she supports. Before we get there, just a couple flashbacks from, her entire career, but especially her period in the U.S. Senate, and then running for president, and then serving as vice president. She was very consistent in her strenuous opposition to a certain border policy and illegal immigration mitigation plan. And here's a very simple distillation of that position that she held forever in Cut 7. Very quick.
Let me be very clear. I'm not going to vote for a wall under any circumstances.
Not going to vote for a wall, the old border wall, under any circumstances. She wanted to be very clear. All right, heard you, loud and clear, ma'am. Here she was, making a further point in Cut 5.
We don't need to build a wall. This is a crisis of his own making. And by definition, just plain speak, basic English language definition, it is not an emergency. We're looking at military resources being focused, again, on the president's vanity project instead of focused on real national security issues.
Apparently the border, not a real national security issue. Some haunting words coming from the future border czar. And we know how things have gone under her watchful eye, or maybe not so watchful eye, at the southern border. Let me be clear, under no circumstances will I vote for the border wall. We don't need a wall. The president's vanity project. She voted against the wall and inveighed against the wall over and over again. And now this, from Axios. Today, headline, Harris flip-flops on building the border wall. Let's read you from the story. If she's elected president, Kamala Harris pledges to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the wall along the southern border, a project she once opposed and called un-American during the Trump administration. It's the latest example of Harris flip-flopping on her past liberal positions, such as supporting Medicare for all and banning fracking, proposals that aides say she is now against. Now, we haven't heard her say any of this, of course. It's all come from the staffers. But what's funny about this one is she is saying that she's in favor of this bipartisan bill, which we opposed here. I think for good reasons. I think it was fatally flawed. But she is, for political reasons, beating the drum on this legislation that she thinks is really important. Now, it's funny, they didn't push for anything like that during the entire early part of the Biden administration. They didn't do a lot of the executive action that they later did coming up to an election season because they said they couldn't. Of course, they could the whole time. They didn't have to undo a bunch of successful Trump border policies. They did so anyway for political reasons. And then right at the end, before an election year, toward the very end of the first term, then all of a sudden, oh, wait, we need a bill. And oh, look, we found some authority over here. We're still not going to reverse our decisions, our worst decisions on Trump policies, but they're putting on a show here. And now part of that show involves supporting hundreds of millions of dollars for the wall. The Axios story says Harris's campaign has portrayed her as an immigration hardliner in ads. And they're not wrong, at least about how they're trying to portray her. I mean, it's a laugh-out-loud, ridiculous, insulting joke, a hardliner who's presided over 10 million illegal border crossings, whose policies explicitly deprioritize deportation, even for illegal immigrants who have been convicted of additional crimes. Someone who calls for the decriminalization of illegal border crossings. Someone who supports taxpayer-funded health care for illegal immigrants. Someone who lectures Americans not to use the term illegal alien because it's too, hateful or hurtful. That's the so-called born-again immigration hardliner. She even has a new ad about this. Cut 2.
Kamala Harris has spent decades fighting violent crime. As a border state prosecutor, she took on drug cartels and jailed gang members for smuggling weapons and drugs across the border. As vice president, she backed the toughest border control bill in decades. And as president, she will hire thousands more border agents and crack down on fentanyl and human trafficking. Fixing the border is tough. So is Kamala Harris.
It's just... the word shameless comes to mind yet again. In one of these ads, remember, she was in footage from her time as AG in California at some drug bust from the cartels, and there were some law enforcement guys behind her. 3 of them, 2 of them came out and said, yeah, we didn't want to be in the ad. We don't support her for president. She's been terrible on these issues. When she showed up that day for the bust, she took credit for something she had nothing to do with. The locals had done it. She blew in here with all the cameras and smiled and waved, didn't even say hello to us, which sounds a lot like Kamala Harris. But now they're trying, oh, yeah, she's tough. Fixing the border's tough, but so is Kamala Harris. She's the border czar and has been since 2021. And it's been the worst crisis ever on that front. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, just ignore all that. Now, here's the thing that I can't show you because we're on radio, obviously, but I can tell you within the ad, there was something interesting that some eagle-eyed observers noticed. Border wall. Trump-era border wall. She opposed the wall at every step, and now she's featuring the wall that she opposed in her own ads. And her campaign is now embracing hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for the wall. I mean, a couple weeks ago, remember when she stole no taxes on tips from Donald Trump? He rolled out that populist plan, snappy slogan. I think it's got some issues. I'm not sitting here being like, oh, I love this. I like the idea of it, but I think there are some real questions about implementation and devil in the details, all of that. But that was Donald Trump's thing. He went to Nevada. He said, I talked to this waitress. I had this idea. He rolled out no tax on tips in Nevada. And then Kamala Harris went to Nevada and said, no tax on tips, y'all. She just stole the plan, which would be brazen enough, except she was the tie-breaking vote on the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which doubled the size of the IRS and explicitly mandated a crackdown on evasion of taxes, for example, on tips, and had a brand new power and mechanism for the IRS, which is now on steroids with new manpower, to go after tip-based wage earners, to make sure that they didn't get away with paying anything less than the absolute dollar and cent amount that they supposedly owed. She did the opposite as vice president of this. It was a 50-50 tie to spend a bunch more money and to double the size of the IRS, and she was the 51st vote. And now she's like, never mind, no tax on tips because he said it. And I joked to a friend of mine, I said, by the debate in September, she's going to be chanting, build the wall. I thought it was a joke, but now here we are. She supports building the wall and funding it to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, and she's putting the Trump wall that she opposed in her own television ads to pretend like the last 4 years never happened, and that she wasn't border czar when 10 million people crossed illegally, 2 million as known gotaways. Now, I have some more sound bites of not long ago Kamala Harris, like 4 seconds ago Kamala Harris, not just opposing the wall, but appealing to her own ostensible expertise for why she's against the wall, not just because it's Trump and it's immoral and un-American and whatever else she said, but because as an expert, a self-stylized expert, she knows it wouldn't work. Here she is, for example, in cut 4. Listen.
And folks, on the subject of transnational gangs, let's be perfectly clear. The president's medieval vanity project is not going to stop them.
Big cheer from the big crowd. If I'm not mistaken, that was her campaign launch for president in Oakland, when she came in with a full head of steam, was seen as a front runner and a top-tier candidate. I think that's how she described herself until she wasn't. Top-tier candidate, and then she crashed and burned in that campaign. But as she gave the big speech in Northern California with that big old crowd, she called the wall Donald Trump's medieval vanity project. Let's be perfectly clear, it's not going to stop them, meaning the bad guys, the gangs, because she's an expert. And she's a prosecutor. So from the very beginning of her last campaign, she was ripping into the border wall as a medieval vanity project. Then we had this in cut 6 from The View, same year. Listen.
This issue is about a vanity project for this president.
Right.
And it is a problem of his own making.
Right.
And listen, when I travel this country, folks have plenty enough problems that they need their president to focus on.
You know what?
Instead of a wall that, by the way, because I was a prosecutor for many years, including the Attorney General of California, I specialize on transnational criminal organizations.
Yeah.
That wall ain't gonna stop them.
No.
Oh, the trained SEALs in the audience at The View loved that line. She was laughing and laughing. This wall's not going to stop them. I was a prosecutor. I specialized on this. Transnational criminal organizations, not going to stop them. Well, actually, if you talk to border officials, as I have, including at the border, I've been there more times than she has. I'm not the border czar, she is. They will tell you walls are not the only solution, but they are a very helpful solution because it assists them in funneling people into certain areas where they cross illegally, which makes it easier to catch them. And you can then really sort of prioritize your resources to certain areas and cut down on gotaways. And often the people who are trying to get away are the most dangerous. So walls and barriers don't just work in the intuitive sense, they work strategically, according to the people whose job it is to secure the border. And Kamala Harris says in her expertise, over and I have like 3 other clips of her doing this, appealing to her own expertise as a prosecutor who specializes in this. Walls don't work. That was her message. Walls don't work. It's not going to stop the bad guys. It's a waste of resources and money. It is a medieval vanity project of Donald Trump. And once again, cut 7, listen.
Let me be very clear. I'm not going to vote for a wall under any circumstances.
Maybe the circumstance that she overlooked is the circumstance under which she needs to lie to a bunch of people for 2.5 months to get elected. Because I guarantee you, these temporary new quote-unquote policies, not just on this issue, but on all the other ones, she doesn't believe these things. We don't even know if she actually has committed to them because she won't talk about any of them, let alone give us any explanation for the complete 180 alleged change of heart. She doesn't believe these things. The proof is in her actual voting record. The proof is in the sound bites that I just played for you. The proof is in her record as border czar and vice president and the catastrophe that has ensued at the southern border. That's reality. What is not reality is her putting the border wall that she hates and opposed in her commercials and now saying, don't worry, we're going to fund the border wall if I win. This is not any legitimate indication of her moderating on an issue. This is an indication, a very clear one, of just how aggressively she is willing to gaslight and to lie until November 6th, the day after the election, if she wins. That's what this is. It is jaw-dropping to look at someone who has been against the border wall forever, often in very, vituperative terms. No wiggle room. I'm an expert. This doesn't work. It's not going to stop anyone. Under no circumstances will I support this, on and on and on. And now it's almost September of an election year. She's been dropped in as an unelected nominee, and she just has to get to November 5th. And if that means putting the wall in the ad like it's hers And her campaign saying, oh, look, we have all this money that we're going to spend on a border wall. I guess so be it. Nobody should believe a word of it. Nobody. Just spitting in our eyes and laughing all the way. And if you'd like an explanation for any of it, tough luck. No questions, please. Move it right on. It's unbelievable. It is literally unbelievable.